The city of St. Paul, Minnesota is learning an important lesson in economics with its stupid rent control policy. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the economics of why the new St. Paul, Minnesota rent control policy will not work, okay? Now, as I've mentioned before, I am 100% opposed to any sort of rent control or price control because I believe that it is a push towards socialism. And by pushing towards socialism, you can just completely destroy our beautiful country. It is a great place. We've seen that socialism does not work, in places like Russia, in places like Venezuela, in places like Cuba. Socialism doesn't work. Okay, a capitalist country gives people incentive to work hard, to build new things, to experiment. And that's why I am 100% in favor of capitalism. It might not be a perfect policy, right? But we're working on it, okay? We're working on it, and it is the most fair policy that is out there right now. So, right now, the people who run St. Paul, Minnesota, the voters there, they need to learn about economics, okay? And this article, it actually goes over the economics of just why this rent control is stupid, okay? Now, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think, okay? Do you think that the average citizen of St. Paul, Minnesota knows anything about economics? I don't, okay? If they voted for this ridiculous rent control policy, they must either have pie in the sky, hopes for the policy that it will actually make improvements to the area without any sort of actual financial knowledge, or they're just dumb. In either case, I think they're dumb. But let's get into it. This is coming from econlib.org, and it says, Econ 101 Lessons from St. Paul. Let's get into it. It's a short one, so I'll make this one pretty quick. Econ 101 has been getting a bad rap for the last few years. The time when Freakonomics was the book to be seen reading if you wanted to look smart is long past, and nowadays the principles taught in Econ 101 are often derided as simplistic, abstract theorizing. Zombie economics removed from the complexities of the real world. Even worse, in books like Economism by James Quack, they are condemned as nothing but rationalizations for particular economic policies. Perhaps it was such arguments that convinced the leaders of St. Paul, Minnesota, that they could ignore the lessons taught in Econ 101. In any intro economics class, students will learn about the effects of price floors and price ceilings. Okay, so let's get right into it. This is the juicy part right here. The part that the people of St. Paul need to understand. A price floor, a legally set minimum price which can be charged for a good or service, will, if set above the market for the good or service in question, lead to a lower quantity demanded and greater quantity supplied than would otherwise be the case, leading to an excess of supply over demand. Price ceilings work in reverse. If set below the market price for the good or service in question, they will lead to a higher quantity demanded and lower quantity supplied than would otherwise be the case, resulting in an excess of demand over supply or shortages. Okay? So, just as an example, right? Let's say that, let's go into the next paragraph because they have a very, very good example there. In 2018, the St. Paul City Council passed a minimum wage ordinance, which from January 2020 would raise the city's minimum wage by stages to $15 an hour for all firms by 2028. The minimum wage is a price floor, setting a price below which it is illegal to buy or sell labor. And according to new research from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, even just the anticipation of minimum wage hike appears to have driven declines in jobs, hours, and overall earnings for restaurant workers in St. Paul, just as Econ 101 would predict. So yeah, by saying that, hey, you cannot pay your employees less than this amount, that means that there's less jobs available. And for the people who do have jobs, they're getting less hours because the businesses can only afford to pay so much money. Just because you say, well, you have to pay $15 an hour doesn't mean that all of a sudden you have to provide 40 hours a week at that $15 an hour to every employee. No, you're going to say, well, I'm going to cut the number of employees I have back, and I'm going to cut the number of hours each one works back so that I can still make a profit during my business. That is what business people do, and that is what people who put these ridiculous minimum wage laws, they don't understand, okay? That's why it was such a big deal, this whole fight for 15. Now, the market has changed, okay? And now there is a worker shortage. So businesses on their own increase their wages. And here in Nebraska, you can go down to the local McDonald's and make almost $15 an hour because there's such a shortage of workers and the employers still need their employees, okay? So, I've always believed that you just let the market work on its own and things will work out. But let's keep going because now they're going to talk about the price ceiling. In elections on November 6th, St. Paulites voted to enact one of the strictest rent control measures in the United States, capping annual rent increases at 3% with no allowance for inflation or exemption for new built properties. A rent control law is a price ceiling, setting a price above which it is illegal to rent accommodation. Econ 101 would then tell us to expect a higher quantity of housing demanded and lower quantities supplied than would be the case at market rate, leading to shortages. Exactly the problem the measure was intended to fix in the first place. It actually creates the problem that they thought the measure was going to fix. They thought rent control was going to fix the housing shortage and fix unaffordable housing, and it actually created it. Economics 101 says this. So, and that is exactly what is happening. Data compiled by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development shows that since the measure was passed, the number of building permits issued in St. Paul is down over 80% compared to the same period during the previous year. The city's mayor, Melvin Carter, who supported the ordinance, is now desperately trying to get it amended to exclude new builds. Well, they don't need to get it amended. They need to get rid of it, okay? So it is a failed policy. It doesn't work. The mayor even knows that it doesn't work, but is trying to amend it because, there's nothing he can really do to repeal it. But it's ridiculous that, once again, they're trying to implement these rent control policies, and it is going to have such a negative effect on the people who live there. The people who voted for it are going to see this, but they're not going to see it at first. At first, they're going to be like, oh, my rent only increased by 3%. But down the line, 20 years from now, it's going to be, the rents are going to be unbearable. There's not going to be a lot of new development unless they decide to change it or get rid of it as soon as possible.